this episode, we get real about a brand new tool that moves our industry forward. I'm your host, Ken, and today we're doing something a little different as we're sitting down with Paul Land, product manager behind a brand new platform that just launched. So let's dive into this. But maybe, Paul, a quick intro about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Paul Land. I'm product manager here at ESCO. I've been with ESCO now just over 8 years. But in actual fact, it may not look like it, but I've been in the industry for nearly 30 years, actually. So, yeah.
That's quite a long career already in this industry. So, yeah. Maybe let's kick things off. What's a bit of a backstory on what is it about this new product, and how this the idea came to life? Can you share a bit of this the story around this?
Well, yeah, I guess so. As you know, product managers, we're always talking to customers and trying to identify problems that we can solve in the industry, and as you well know, Ken, we speak to customers a lot, even going and visiting customers on site and kind of visiting the studios and their offices and trying to map out their whole processes and understand a lot of the pain points. And we did that quite a number of times, actually. And of course, Ken, I think you even were involved in one of those in what I call our UX design workshops as well. Maybe you can share a little bit on your findings from that before I continue, because that's kind of one of the starting points, I guess, for this whole story.
Well, yeah, we have some different things in our toolkit, how we do our market research, and indeed one of them is what we call a design workshop, where we also go to customers, visit them, and actually see what problems they are facing on the shop floor, so you can witness it with your own eyes. And that was definitely an interesting tool when you go and visit them and see what's really bothering them, or what's where the bottlenecks are.
Yeah, indeed. And one of the major things that we kind of highlighted was kind of the bottlenecks that happen from the CSR perspective, So, from an ESCO perspective, we've done a lot of work in automating the pre-press in terms of with automation engine and, automated that whole pre-press section. But then when you realize actually there's a whole huge new bottleneck in another department, which is kind of the CSR department, and that's really where we're kind of focused with our new tool, if you like, and really trying to address many of the problems that are happening at that early stage process. Even getting the work into the organization in the first place. That's one of the main problems that we're trying to solve, shall we say.
Okay, and so talking to those users, was there really anything that's really surprised you or stuck with you?
I guess there's just, as you go through that whole VSM process, when you're mapping out that whole stage, one of the things that becomes apparent is the whole kind of waiting time. Yeah, so what I mean by that is that the CSR is very much, the CSR and the customer service representative, are very much dependent upon other departments within the organization, whether that be for maybe estimation or whether that be for file validation as well. So, for example, files come into the organization and they're passed on to pre-press, and that whole waiting time incurs, a lot of frustration and feeding back that information to the end user as well. So I guess it's, in short, it's that waiting time, I think, or the amount of waiting time that there is in that whole process, I think, is kind of one of the biggest eye-openers for me, certainly.
Yeah, we certainly have the ambition to reduce the lead time overall for our packaging suppliers, and then the waiting time, if that's something what would be easy to address if we can smoothen that process and the handover between the different departments.
Exactly.
Leveraging the technology to share the expertise across the different departments. That's interesting when we look at this. So maybe that's the most significant improvement and what you will bring, what this new product will bring to Packaging Converter. Is that really all about the waiting time, or are there a few other aspects that can also?
Well, I guess, yeah, waiting time is one thing, but how do you kind of reduce that waiting time? And one of the things that we're trying to do is move some of the processes that can be moved upstream more upstream. So for example, when a file comes in and being able to process that file automatically, the whole pre-flight process, that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we see, that from the CSR that pass those files on to the pre-press department, and the pre-press is obviously already booked out with work, and then having to wait the whole waiting time again, as we mentioned. But if the CSR can become a lot more self-reliant and being able to perform checks earlier in the process and feedback to their customer much more effectively and much more quickly, then that, it cutting a lot of waiting time out of that process. Typically it could be 1 to even 2 days that you're cutting out of that whole process. So that really, goes towards our kind of mission from an ESCO perspective in reducing that time to market. That's what we're wanting to help our customers achieve, that, getting those files in and to press as quickly as possible.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's an important remark. So when the files are arrived at the CSR's desk, there might not be an order yet. They might not have anything to plan the work for pre-press, and this is something they need to do in between. And you know how it goes. Pre-press operators have their planning. Need to focus on getting everything done for sending it to the press. And then this is typically something, the validation of the artwork is typically something that needs to be done in between.
Yeah, exactly. Typically, it's not something that's kind of planned into the process, because you don't know when files are going to come in. So it's not like you can plan that into the whole process. So it is always a case of interrupting a planned schedule already, So yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah. Okay. I'm thinking a bit about the visits that I did, but let's be honest. How messy were some of the current processes that we saw when we went out to customers? Like I'm thinking about the number of tools CSRs were using, or maybe the variation of tools they were using to validate artwork files and do some checks. Can you recall some of those, or can you share something?
Yes, I guess many, it's a problem. Spoken to many customers of this, but it's a recognized problem in the industry, I guess. And what I mean by that is that everybody's trying to solve it in kind of in different ways, and that means using tools that may be out in the industry, but these tools are not integrated into that whole process. So you're having to connect all of these different systems together somehow. And, typically, I say typically, an extreme case would be, 8 to 10 different types of systems that are used to collect all of this information and try and get validation on those files before then passing it on to pre-press and all those types of things. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a mess, I would say, out there. All the different tools, different services even that you can that can be used to bring files into your organization in the first place. There are many different file transfer services, cloud storage services, FTP, you name it. There's a ton of them out there, and if you're asking one customer to deliver those files, it can be a mess, and it can be delivered in many different ways. So it's kind of using for the whole CSR as well, where are these files stored, for example.
Yeah. Well, one thing that also stuck with me was even the variation of tools for the same thing. So looking at the PDF file, opening a file, we came across some of those cases where we saw people using free viewers, professional viewers that were out there on the market, versus the free Adobe Reader or the built-in Mac OS. But all to validate the same artwork file, but giving different results.
Yeah, but you know that these tools are not packaging specific tools. They have no idea. They don't have any context of packaging. It's just a PDF viewer. So viewing even color separations or overprint preview, you know what a nightmare it is to kind of view these files in the first place.
Yeah, they were even looking at having different results for looking at the same file amongst colleagues. So imagine this. This was how much confusion this could.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah.
So let's maybe let's give your elevator pitch. What is this product or service all about?
So like I said, it's all about enabling the CSR. I think that's what it's all about. And in the first instance, what we're looking to do is solve a major problem, and that is onboarding the files. Okay. And so what we're doing is providing a platform that enables our customers to get their customers' files into the system as quickly as possible and get validation and verification of those files straight away. Yeah, but reducing the friction. One of the feedbacks that we had from many of our customers is that they would like to get their customers to log into a portal and drop files in. But one of the friction points is that it's actually logging into a system. So we're providing a frictionless process in being able to get those files into the system, meaning they don't have to log in. So it's just a pure drag and drop type of scenario where a pre-flight report is then initiated straight away. So it's really, in short, I know that's a long elevator pitch, I'm aware of that, but in short, it's all about getting those files into the system as quickly as possible and getting verification as quickly as possible in the first instance. Yeah.
Okay. So it's all about the communication between CSR and the customer or the print buyer. What is it?
No, that's a good point. It's about communication between the print buyer, the CSR, and also you can include the pre-press department in that whole process as well. So that all information that can come through from the print buyer, viewed by the CSR, can all then be directly communicated to the pre-press department, because the pre-press is all connected in that whole process.
Yeah, that will definitely have an impact on the waiting time that we mentioned earlier. If you can connect all the dots.
Yeah.
Okay. So what makes it different from everything else out there? Because there have been some tools out there or tools that could be leveraged for this kind of purpose. What is?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. Actually, when I think about it, it's built into the system. So the whole pre-flight process is built into the system. You're not having to offload, getting that file in and then offload that file into another system to run the pre-flight or to check the file and then deliver some information back. What we're happening here is that actually as soon as the file is uploaded, there's a pre-flight report generated straight away. So it's within 30 seconds you've got that pre-flight report at hand, and you can see that the report and all of the errors or fixes that we can also apply, because we can apply fixes to the files in many cases as well, and having visibility of that whole process without even interrupting the pre-press department. Okay, it's all built into a single solution.
Yeah, but that's sounds better when it's all integrated and built in. Was there? I can imagine this has been a journey for you, being involved in this whole ideation till now, the release of the product.
Yeah.
And it's probably been a bumpy ride as well. Like you go through different emotions, some stumbling blocks, maybe. When was there one moment that you said like, "Hey, we're really onto something here"? Based on customer feedback, early customer feedback, or beta releases, or Was there such a moment?
I think there's been many moments, but I think if I think about it, the one that really stands out for me is the previous ESCO World that we did. So back in 2024. So it's been in development quite a while, and it was a prototype that we showed back at ESCO World, and really the response from the audience was absolutely overwhelming. When you're talking about, is this solving a valuable problem for you? And everybody in the room kind of stands up. That's kind of, wow, we're really, solving a major problem here. I think that for me was kind of one of the, we're onto something big here. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine the feels right if you ask that question and you see this spot of the audience. Yeah. Let's say I'm a pre-press manager listening to this on my during my lunch. How does this make my day easier for them, or my life easier for my team, for the work I need to do?
For the pre-press manager, of course, we've talked a lot about the CSR and how it improves kind of that waiting time. But of course, from the pre-press manager, we've talked about that the interruptions. Yeah, so it's about reducing those interruptions, because the way that I see it, the more interruptions there are, the higher the likelihood is of errors creeping into work, and it just becomes less efficient. So if you can reduce the amount of interruptions from the pre-press perspective, and of course from the pre-press manager not having to reschedule work or replan work and having that constant replanning process, if we can reduce that as well, that makes their life much easier. That, I think, would be the biggest benefit. And the other thing is, and we talked about it, I'm just thinking on the fly as we're talking, that the whole communication piece. So if you can communicate better between the CSR and the pre-press department, then that, reduces that waiting time, reduces confusion in the whole process as well, and reduces the number of questions that can be that will be asked.
Yeah.
Departments as well. That's another major aspect, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, that's definitely an interesting insight on the communication improvements between the end user or the pre-press user and the customer or the CSR. Avoids a lot of confusion throughout the process.
Yeah, indeed.
Is there a favorite example of something that used to take forever, but now it's just done and it's just happening through this service or platform?
Well, I guess, yeah. It's about, that customer feedback, and you said it before, what was the aha moment? And I think for me, it's like, getting that feedback from the customers. So getting feedback from customers, like they're able to produce, book in twice as many jobs as there were previously with the same number of people. So they're getting through more work without having to, increase the headcount, for example. So for me, it's like all about that efficiency that they're gaining by not having that waiting time, and improving customer satisfaction as well. So, I think that's the big point. Yeah.
Okay. I realize we're just getting started. There's a huge backlog, but can you share something around the backlog, or what are you excited about in the next product releases that are coming?
Oh, yeah. Well, we do have a couple of exciting things that are coming up very, very shortly. So, again, based on customer feedback, and I think it's really important that, that's the way that we're working, and from a cloud perspective, because this is a cloud product we're talking about, we're able to react very, very quickly to customer feedback. And one of the things that customers have said to us is it would be really cool if we had this kind of, they call it an open link. So what does that mean? That means that as a customer, you can create a link for your customer to be able to upload files constantly. Okay, so you're not having to go out and request a customer to upload into the system. It's like an open portal that you can have by customer to upload those files directly. So your customer has this open link, where you can set an expiry date on that, and you can set privileges, etc. But they don't have to continually log into the system, so they can just simply drag and drop files into the system and create the job in the system, completely automated. And that was one of the big asks from our community, our customers, to be able to achieve that. So I'm happy to say that that's some of the things that's coming in one of the next releases very shortly.
Yeah, but you mentioned also something interesting, because this is a cloud native product. How do you see the customer feedback being built into next product releases? Because I'm thinking back of our traditional release schedule within ESCO for our traditional applications is 4 times a year.
Yeah.
So those are longer development cycles. Is cloud bringing something? Are cloud developments bringing something new to our customers?
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine, being able, historically releasing 3 or 4 times a year, you do what's new and you do training, etc., etc. But I think with cloud, we can take a completely different approach to that. So, utilizing tools that allow you to do product tours, that allow you to get feedback, customers being able to give feedback from directly within the application as well. So again, that's something that's coming in one of the future releases as well. So you can be able to get that instant feedback from customers as well, and being able to provide guided tours for usability as well, because that's one of the other things, that the tool itself has to be super easy to use. I think that's one of the things that we've applied to the technology as well.
So it's actually there's something that the user adoption and how they are using it, what features are they using, what functionality are they using, is something that we take into account for our next product releases. Maybe improve certain areas that are well used, or that we see that are taking just still too long, or is there something in specific that you as a product management or product manager or a team are keeping an eye on, that on how people are using it?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the foundational pieces of utilizing cloud technology, being able to I won't say track, but being able to view how customers are using your product. Yeah, I think that's one of the important things. It's all about usability, and if users are struggling to navigate through the system to perform certain piece of functionality, whatever that might be, I think it's important for us to recognize that and be able to change that process to make it easier for the end user. That's what it's all about, being able, making it much easier for the end customer. That's the goal.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
Before we wrap it up, what is one thing that you hope listeners take away from this episode?
Good question. What's the one thing to take away? I guess that you don't have to work in the chaos that it is today. Yeah. So we've not mentioned the name of the product yet, but Web Center Pack is the name, and Web Center Pack removes a lot of that chaos. That's what I'm trying to say. So simplify your processes by implementing Web Center Pack. I think that's got to be not just simplifying the process, but it's simplifying the whole communication throughout the whole within your organization as well.
Okay. Yeah, good. And if someone is curious about this and want to see this for himself, where should they go?
Head straight to esco.com, click on the Web Center Pack. On there, you can actually, request to start a 30-day trial as well. So, again, that's one of the advantages of cloud. You can log straight. You'll be able to, once the trial is activated, being able to log straight into the system and start to take advantage of those tools pretty much straight away, to be honest. So, esco.com, Web Center Pack, that's where you need to go.
Yeah, and see it for yourself, experience it for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Big thanks to Paul for joining us and giving us that behind the scenes look at thinking, challenges, and momentum behind the launch of Web Center Pack. Thank you for listening and hoping to catch you next time.